Pam Bondi, the seasoned political powerhouse, publicly insulted Karoline Leavitt on live TV. You heard right. But what happened next? Caroline's response wasn't just a defense, it was a game changer. What started as an innocent political debate turned into a seismic moment that stunned the entire country. You won't believe how this shocking exchange unfolded. The cameras rolled, the lights blazed down on the set, and Karoline Leavitt walked onto the stage with the poise of a seasoned politician. She was ready to talk about her work transforming communities, her fresh approach to politics, and the future she envisioned for America. The audience applauded her, but there was an undeniable tension in the air. Something felt different. The calm before the storm was thick, and Karoline had no idea what was coming. Across from her sat Pam Bondi, a veteran of political battles, known for her sharp tongue and no-nonsense attitude. There had always been ideological differences between the two, but today felt like something more. This wasn't just another interview. This was shaping up to be a collision of personalities. Pam had a reputation for tearing down her opponents, but Karoline wasn't just any opponent. She was young, ambitious, and ready to make her mark. The host, trying to keep the conversation civil, asked a simple question. You both have been on opposite ends of the political spectrum for years, but today we'll be discussing some of the most important issues facing America. Pam, Karoline, let's start with your thoughts on recent political shifts. What should have been a typical discussion about policy quickly turned into a battlefield. Pam's eyes narrowed, her smile sharpened. Those who knew her recognized the signal. This was not going to be a normal debate. Pam was about to launch a personal attack. Well, Karoline, Pam began, her voice laced with sarcasm, it's interesting to see how someone with so little experience could get so much attention. Must be nice to get by on looks and empty promises, huh? The words hit hard. The audience shifted in their seats, unsure of how to react. Pam's insult was not just political, it was personal. The host, visibly uncomfortable, glanced between the two women, but Karoline didn't flinch. She didn't even hesitate. With the calmness of a leader who had been through far worse, Karoline responded, You know, Pam, it's easy to throw stones when you spent your whole career hiding behind others' backs. But I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. The room fell silent. It was the kind of moment that you couldn't look away from. Karoline had just flipped the script, and Pam, the political veteran, found herself on the defensive. The usual tactics that had served Pam so well in the past were no longer working. Karoline wasn't backing down. She wasn't afraid of the fight, and now the whole world was watching. The tension in the room was electric. The host awkwardly cleared his throat, trying to regain control of the situation, but neither woman was willing to step down. The audience, caught in the whirlwind of this unexpected confrontation, could feel that this was no longer about policy, it was personal, and this was just the beginning. What happens next? Stay with us because this showdown is far from over, and what Karoline does next will leave you stunned. The media storm surrounding Karoline Leavitt's calm yet defiant response to Pam Bondi's insult was swift, and it quickly became one of the most talked about events in recent political history. News outlets across the country replayed the heated exchange, dissecting every word spoken, every gesture made. Pundits from all sides of the political spectrum offered their takes on the showdown, creating a storm of commentary that dominated the headlines for days. On one side of the debate, those who admired Karoline's poise and ability to stand her ground praised her for turning the tables on Pam. It takes guts to face down an established figure like Pam Bondi and not back down, said one prominent political analyst. What Karoline did was nothing short of a masterclass in maintaining composure under pressure. She didn't just respond, she reframed the argument. Others saw Karoline's response as a bold assertion of her identity as a rising political star, someone who was willing to challenge the entrenched political elites head-on. Her supporters hailed her as a new kind of leader, one unafraid to speak truth to power. On the other hand, there were those who criticized Karoline's reply, accusing her of fueling the fire rather than diffusing it. She's playing into the drama, one conservative commentator remarked. Instead of focusing on real issues, she's getting tangled up in personal conflicts. This is a dangerous game for a young politician to play. For these critics, Karoline's retort was seen as too calculated, an attempt to manipulate the public's perception of the confrontation rather than engage in a substantive discussion of policy. They argued that by responding the way she did, Karoline risked alienating the very voters she was trying to reach, those who were tired of the divisive, personal attacks that had come to define modern politics. The real shock, however, came from Karoline's words themselves, particularly the line that would be repeated endlessly across social media and in the news. "You hide behind others' backs." This single statement became the focal point of the debate. For many, it felt like a direct hit to Pam Bondi's carefully curated image of a strong, experienced political figure. The line seemed to cut through the layers of professionalism that Pam had spent years building. To many, it sounded as though Karoline had finally pierced the facade, exposing a vulnerability in someone who had always been seen as untouchable. The phrase resonated with people on a deeply emotional level, particularly those who had grown frustrated with the political establishment. It wasn't just a criticism, it was an accusation of cowardice, and it landed with a force that would reverberate for days to come. The aftermath of the broadcast saw the rivalry between Karoline and Pam intensify as each side doubled down on their respective positions. Karoline's team, eager to capitalize on the momentum generated by the exchange, quickly released a statement reaffirming her commitment to making a difference in America. The statement struck a confident tone, emphasizing Karoline's vision for a new generation of leadership and a government that would serve the people, not the powerful elites. Karoline's words in the aftermath reflected the resolve she had shown on live TV. She wasn't just defending herself, she was pushing forward with her message of change, ready to take on anyone who stood in her way. Pam's response, however, was a study in silence. Her camp remained eerily quiet for the first few days after the broadcast. There were no statements, no interviews, no social media posts. It was as if Pam had disappeared from the public eye entirely. This absence only fueled speculation. Was she reeling from the criticism? Was she plotting her next move? Or was she simply waiting for the storm to blow over? Behind closed doors, however, Pam was anything but passive. In private meetings with her closest allies and advisors, Pam was seething. The woman who had built a reputation as a political powerhouse was now facing an unexpected challenge from a newcomer. And this wasn't just a minor setback. This was an attack on her very authority. Karoline's words had cut deep, and Pam was determined to make her pay. Pam's allies, some of the most influential figures in American politics, rallied around her, offering support and advising her on how to respond. These were seasoned veterans of the political machine, people who had seen their fair share of public challenges. But even they recognized that this was a different kind of fight. Karoline wasn't just another opponent in a political skirmish. She was a symbol of something bigger, the younger generation, hungry for change and unafraid to take on the established order. Pam's team knew that the next move was critical. They needed to strike back, but they had to do so in a way that wouldn't backfire. Pam's next public appearance was highly anticipated. The media was abuzz with speculation about how she would respond to Karoline's attack. Would she confront the issue head-on, or would she attempt to brush it aside? Everyone was watching, waiting for her to make her move. When Pam finally stepped out in front of the cameras, she was not the woman who had hurled an insult on national television. Gone was the brash, sharp-edged persona that had made her a formidable political figure. Instead, she was the seasoned politician who had been bruised but not broken, her demeanor cool and controlled. She gave no indication that she had been rattled by Karoline's response, but those who knew her well could see the tension in her posture, the slight clench of her jaw as she faced the media. Her response was carefully crafted, aimed at disarming her critics without giving Karoline further ammunition. "Politics is about more than just words," Pam said, her voice steady but pointed. "It's about leadership, experience, and making tough decisions for the good of the country. I've spent my career doing just that." Karoline, on the other hand, is still learning the ropes. She continued with a message designed to reassert her authority, subtly undermining Karoline's credibility. Pam's tone was measured, but there was no mistaking the underlying message. Karoline was still a novice, someone who didn't yet understand the complexities of true leadership. However, while Pam tried to regain her footing, something unexpected was happening in the court of public opinion. The American public had begun to take sides, and the tide was shifting in Karoline's favor. Her social media following surged, with supporters rallying behind her message of change and resilience. The hashtag #StandWithCaroline began trending, and posts flooding social media platforms were overwhelmingly supportive of her. On the other hand, Pam's approval ratings began to take a noticeable dip. Once the dominant figure in the political sphere, Pam was now finding herself on the defensive, struggling to maintain the influence she had spent years cultivating. It seemed as if the tides were shifting, and Pam was not used to losing ground so quickly. For someone who had built her career on being a tough, unyielding figure, this was a humbling experience. The challenge was no longer just political. It had become deeply personal. Pam's pride was wounded, and Karoline, by all accounts, was emerging as a legitimate threat. For Karoline, this was a proving ground. She knew that the battle had only just begun, but one thing was clear. Neither woman would back down. The fight for their reputations, their futures, and their legacies had only just begun. The days that followed the heated live TV confrontation were filled with behind-the-scenes maneuvering, as both Pam Bondi and Karoline Leavitt steeled themselves for the next phase of their public battle. The political world was buzzing, with commentators speculating on what would come next. But for the two women at the center of it all, the stakes were personal as much as political. The showdown on national television had left Pam feeling vulnerable, and Karoline, despite her calm demeanor, knew this was her moment to solidify her place in the political landscape. Pam Bondi, the seasoned politician with decades of experience, was known for her sharp, tactical mind. Yet for the first time in a long while, she found herself on the defensive. Karoline's quick-witted response to her insult had struck a chord with the public, and the media frenzy that followed had left Pam reeling. She couldn't afford to let the narrative slip away. Karoline's words had resonated far beyond the TV screen, and Pam knew that if she didn't regain control soon, she could lose more than just her reputation. She could lose the political clout she had spent years building. The atmosphere in Pam's office was tense. Staff members scurried about, preparing for the next phase of the battle. Pam's closest advisors were gathered around a conference table, papers and laptops strewn across it. The room was filled with the hum of whispered conversations and hurried discussions, each person focused on one thing: how to counter Karoline's rising star. Pam sat at the head of the table, her eyes scanning the social media feeds that had exploded in the aftermath of the debate. Karoline's follower count was growing by the minute, with posts from across the political spectrum expressing support for her. "I can't let her make a fool of me," Pam muttered under her breath, her fingers hovering over the phone screen. She wasn't just frustrated, she was furious. She's young and inexperienced, but she's got the public on her side. We need to make her look like the amateur she truly is. Pam's voice was tight, her tone laced with frustration. She had underestimated Karoline before, but now it was clear that this young political figure was more formidable than she had initially realized. Her team had been working nonstop since the broadcast, analyzing Karoline's every move, every word, and every social media post. Pam's advisors debated several approaches, each one more strategic than the last. There was no room for error this time. One misstep could cost Pam not only public perception, but her carefully crafted image as a seasoned politician with years of experience. She knew that to regain control of the narrative, she had to hit back hard, but she also had to be careful not to alienate the voters she still needed to win over. "She's young," Pam's communications director Michael began, his voice steady as he laid out the options. "And the youth vote is strong, but we can exploit her inexperience. Focus on her record, the gaps in her policies. She's not as prepared as she claims to be." Pam nodded, rubbing her temples. "But we can't just go in guns blazing," she said. "We need something subtle, something that makes people question her credibility. If we go too hard, it could backfire. I need something that makes her seem out of touch with reality, like she's too caught up in the spotlight to care about the issues." After several hours of debate, a strategy began to take shape. Pam's team would craft a series of carefully worded attacks, subtle but effective. They would focus on Karoline's past, her rise in politics, and any potential contradictions in her policy statements. The aim was to create doubt about Karoline's ability to lead, to plant the idea that she was a product of media hype, rather than a serious political contender. The first of these attacks came in the form of a TV ad that aired later that week. The ad was a masterstroke of political warfare, sharp, pointed, and calculated. It highlighted moments from Karoline's past, focusing on her early political career and the missteps she had made. It juxtaposed Karoline's soaring rhetoric with footage of her stumbling through key policy questions in interviews. The ad painted her as a political lightweight, a woman whose ambition far exceeded her knowledge and experience. The people deserve someone who has been tested, who has weathered the storms of Washington. Pam's voice echoed over the ad, her tone measured and serious. Karoline Leavitt may be a rising star, but the real question is she ready to lead? The ad was a calculated risk, but Pam's team was confident it would land a blow. After all, it was one thing to make a bold statement on TV, but it was another to back it up with a slick, professional campaign. The media reacted immediately, with pundits discussing whether Pam's approach was a sign of desperation or a calculated move to undermine her opponent. Meanwhile, Karoline, undeterred by the attacks, was doubling down on her own efforts. Despite the pressure, she remained resolute. She wasn't just playing defense. She was seizing the moment and using it to fuel her campaign. Her political team worked tirelessly to amplify her message, making sure that every word of support from her growing base was heard. Karoline's social media platforms, which had exploded in the wake of the live TV confrontation, continued to swell with new followers. She was no longer just an unknown figure. She was a force to be reckoned with. But Karoline wasn't content with simply surviving the attack. She saw the ad as a gift, an opportunity to prove her worth. Her message remained simple yet powerful. She wasn't just another career politician like Pam. She wasn't interested in the status quo. She was interested in real change. Karoline was determined to show the world that she could go toe-to-toe with the establishment, that she had the courage to challenge those who had been in power for decades. Her team, realizing the significance of the moment, launched a counteroffensive that was both smart and direct. Karoline took to social media, posting a video in which she responded to Pam's latest attack. "Pam wants to talk about experience," she said in the video, her voice calm but firm. "But what's her experience really gotten us? More of the same? More of the same old politics, the same tired rhetoric. If we keep electing the same people, we'll keep getting the same results. We need fresh ideas, new leadership. And that's exactly what I bring to the table." The video went viral, reaching millions of viewers in a matter of hours. Karoline's supporters flooded her social media accounts with messages of encouragement, using hashtags like #NewLeadership and #FreshIdeas. Karoline had made it clear that she wasn't backing down, and the media took notice. The narrative was shifting, slowly but surely. Where once Pam had been the undisputed frontrunner, now she was facing a formidable challenger who was gaining momentum by the day. Behind the scenes, both women were fully aware of the stakes. Karoline knew that she couldn't afford to lose her momentum, and Pam knew that if she didn't regain control soon, she could find herself on the sidelines of a political battle that she had once dominated. The fight was no longer just about policy. It was about their futures, their legacies, and the very soul of American politics. Both women were determined to come out on top, and neither was willing to concede. The gloves were off, and the battle for control of the political narrative had only just begun. The battle between Pam Bondi and Karoline Leavitt had escalated far beyond a mere political rivalry. It had evolved into a public spectacle that captivated the nation. Every move they made was scrutinized by millions, from their speeches to their gestures, their smiles to their silences. Media outlets, both traditional and digital, poured over every aspect of the two women's campaigns, dissecting their words and actions like pieces of a puzzle. Pundits from across the political spectrum weighed in, offering their takes on the ongoing showdown, while everyday citizens joined the fray, voicing their opinions on social media. It was no longer just about policies or political platforms. The fight had taken on a more personal and visceral tone. It was about power, ambition, and the future of American politics. Karoline, with her youth and fresh perspective, represented a new wave of leadership, while Pam, a seasoned veteran of political battles, was fighting to maintain her relevance and her influence. Each of them understood the stakes, but neither was prepared to back down. Pam knew she had to act quickly if she wanted to regain the upper hand. The media storm surrounding her initial insult to Karoline was already fading, but the damage had been done. Karoline's cool and collected response had sparked a firestorm of support from younger voters, and the public narrative had shifted in her favor. Pam's approval ratings had begun to stagnate, and she couldn't afford to let Karoline's momentum continue unchecked. She needed to regain control before it was too late. Her team, ever the strategic masterminds, crafted a carefully orchestrated plan designed to expose Karoline's inexperience and ambition. The message was clear. Karoline may have captured the public's attention, but she lacked the skills and depth necessary to lead the country. The first step in this plan was a viral ad campaign. The ads showcased a series of past interviews with Karoline, where she stumbled over policy details, struggled to answer direct questions, and failed to offer concrete solutions to the country's most pressing issues. The campaign painted her as a political novice, someone more interested in media attention than in actually governing. The message was simple. Karoline was out of her depth, and the American people deserved better. As the ad campaign spread, it quickly caught fire. The ads were everywhere, on TV, social media, and in news segments. Pam's team worked tirelessly to ensure that the narrative they were building would dominate the airwaves. The goal was to make Karoline's rise look like a media creation, an overhyped campaign driven by the sensationalism of her youth and inexperience. The message was subtle but powerful. Karoline was more about the spotlight than about substance, and the American public needed a leader who was ready to face the complexities of governance. But Karoline, for all the attacks thrown her way, was ready for the fight. She had grown accustomed to the scrutiny and was determined not to let the attacks define her. Instead, she used Pam's ad campaign as an opportunity to solidify her position as the voice of the new generation of leaders. She knew that her strength lay in her authenticity and her ability to connect with the American people on a personal level. If Pam wanted to make her seem inexperienced, Karoline would turn that narrative on its head by showing that her lack of decades-long experience wasn't a weakness. It was a strength. During a live TV interview, Karoline addressed Pam's criticisms head-on, using the platform to turn the attack into a statement of purpose. As the cameras rolled, Karoline looked directly into the lens, her voice calm and steady. She was not angry, not defensive, just resolute. "Pam," Karoline began, her voice carrying an air of quiet confidence, "it's clear that you want to distract the American people from the real issues. We need a government that prioritizes people, not power. We need leaders who care about the future, not their own legacies. The people are tired of the same old politics, the same old faces. They want change, and that change is coming. I'm not here to play the political games that have been played for decades. I'm here to make a real difference." Her words hit like a punch to the gut. There was no aggression in her tone, only a deep conviction that resonated with millions of viewers, particularly younger Americans who had long felt disillusioned with the political elite. Karoline's response wasn't just about defending herself against Pam's attacks. It was a declaration of her vision for the country. She wasn't just a politician. She was a symbol of the new wave of leadership that America needed. A leadership that wasn't bound by the old rules, but instead sought to break free from them. For many, Karoline's words represented a refreshing change from the status quo. She was speaking directly to a generation that had grown tired of the same political games and empty promises, and the impact was immediate. Social media exploded with support for Karoline as her followers shared her interview, praised her confidence, and vowed to rally behind her. The hashtag #NewLeadership began trending, and soon Karoline's social media accounts were filled with messages of encouragement and support. Her base was growing, and she could feel the shift in the political winds. But even as Karoline's popularity surged, Pam was far from ready to concede. The ad campaign had failed to land the blow she had hoped for, and Karoline's response had only strengthened her standing. Pam knew she had to dig deeper if she wanted to stay relevant in the race. This battle was no longer just about politics. It had become a matter of personal survival. Pam couldn't afford to lose the momentum she had worked so hard to build, and she wasn't about to let some young upstart take her down without a fight. Behind closed doors, Pam called in her allies, some of the most powerful figures within her party. The names were well known in Washington, seasoned politicians and power brokers who had weathered their own storms in the political arena. Pam's meeting with them was tense, as the gravity of the situation began to sink in. Karoline's rise was no longer a passing trend. It was a serious challenge to the established order, and it had to be dealt with. "We need to go after her hard," one of Pam's allies suggested, a senior senator known for his sharp tongue and even sharper political instincts. "Expose her contradictions. If she's so committed to change, why is she surrounding herself with the same people who've been part of the problem for years?" Pam nodded, her mind already working through the possibilities. It was clear that Karoline's outsider status was both her greatest strength and her biggest weakness. The narrative would shift again, Pam decided. Instead of simply attacking Karoline's inexperience, the focus would now be on the people she was aligning herself with. Was she truly the fresh face of politics, or was she just another pawn in a game played by the same power brokers she claimed to despise? But for now, Pam had to wait. The political landscape was shifting beneath her feet, and it was clear that the stakes had never been higher. Both women were locked in a fierce battle for control of the narrative, and neither was willing to give an inch. As the weeks wore on, the public attention intensified. Karoline's campaign was gaining ground, while Pam's approval ratings continued to stagnate. It seemed as though Karoline's message of change was resonating more and more, and Pam was losing the advantage she had once enjoyed. Yet Pam's determination remained unshaken. She wasn't ready to concede. She had weathered political storms before, and she wasn't going to let a young upstart like Karoline take her down without a fight. The final confrontation was drawing near, and both women knew it. The gloves were off, and it was clear that this battle would determine not just their political futures, but the direction of American politics for years to come. The fight had only just begun, and the outcome was still uncertain. The final showdown between Pam Bondi and Karoline Leavitt was poised to be the most significant and dramatic moment in their rivalry. A national televised debate, broadcast to millions of viewers across the country, would be their most public confrontation yet. This debate was more than just a platform for policy discussions. It had become the battleground for their political futures. The stakes had never been higher. This was not only a fight for their careers, it was a battle that would determine the direction of the political landscape in America. Both women, each representing a distinctly different vision for the future, had everything to lose and everything to gain. Pam, with her years of experience and established position in the political world, was aiming to solidify her dominance and expose Karoline's lack of readiness for the complex world of governance. Karoline, the young upstart, with a message of change, was determined to prove that she wasn't just a fleeting media sensation, but a legitimate force capable of leading the country into a new era. In the days leading up to the debate, both women immersed themselves in their preparations, though their strategies were starkly different. Pam, with her seasoned political acumen, worked closely with her team of consultants, carefully sharpening her arguments and rehearsing her responses. She had one clear goal in mind: expose Karoline's inexperience, her youthful ambition, and her lack of substance. Pam knew that this debate was her chance to take back control, to remind the public why she had been in power for so long. It wasn't just about winning the debate. It was about dominating the conversation and reaffirming her place as a leader in the political arena. Karoline, in contrast, was focused on staying true to her core message. She knew that her strength lay not in traditional political tactics, but in her authenticity and her connection with the American people. She was not interested in simply defeating Pam in a battle of rhetoric. She wanted to show the country that her vision for America was the one they should follow. Karoline spent countless hours studying policy details, learning from past debates, and refining her delivery. She worked tirelessly with her team to ensure that, no matter what Pam threw at her, she would respond with grace, conviction, and clarity. When the night of the debate arrived, the anticipation was palpable. The stage was set, the lights were blinding, and the crowd buzzed with excitement. This was a moment that would be etched into history. As the cameras rolled, millions of viewers sat on the edge of their seats, ready for what promised to be a clash of ideals, a contest for the future of the country. The debate began with the moderator asking each candidate to outline their vision for the future of America. Pam went first, confidently taking the stage. She spoke with the calm assurance of someone who had been in the political game for decades. Her speech was polished, filled with rhetoric about the importance of experience, tradition, and the need to preserve the status quo. She spoke to the older, more conservative segment of the audience, the ones who valued stability and believed that the country's best days were behind it. Her words were calculated, meant to reassure those who feared change and cling to what they knew. Karoline, however, was not intimidated. When it was her turn, she took a deep breath and walked to the podium, her posture straight and strong. As she began to speak, her voice was calm but powerful, carrying the weight of someone who understood that this moment was her chance to make a lasting impression. "I respect experience," Karoline began, her words measured but bold. "But experience alone is not enough. We need leaders who are willing to challenge the system, not protect it. We need leaders who will put the American people first, not their own political careers. We need leaders who aren't afraid to break away from the old guard and fight for what's right." Her words resonated with the audience. Karoline's message was clear, and it was exactly what many people needed to hear. She wasn't just speaking about politics in the abstract. She was addressing the real concerns of everyday Americans, those who felt abandoned by the system, those who were tired of watching career politicians fight for their own power while ignoring the needs of the people. The applause that followed Karoline's statement was deafening. It was clear that her words had struck a chord with many viewers, especially the younger generation who had long felt disconnected from the establishment. Karoline wasn't just offering a political platform. She was offering hope, a vision of a better, more inclusive future. Pam, however, was not about to let her opponent's words go unchallenged. She shot back with a barrage of criticisms, questioning Karoline's ability to lead and accusing her of being reckless, idealistic, and unprepared for the complexities of governance. Pam's tone was sharp and cutting, but Karoline stood her ground, responding with poise and confidence. Pam's criticisms were dismissed with ease as Karoline exposed the contradictions in Pam's arguments. She called out Pam for focusing more on preserving the old system than on addressing the pressing issues of the day, like healthcare, income inequality, and the climate crisis. Pam, she argued, had spent her career playing political games while ordinary Americans suffered. The debate grew increasingly intense as the two women clashed over every issue imaginable. The audience was captivated, hanging on to every word, as the two women fought tooth and nail for their vision of America's future. It was clear that neither woman was willing to back down. The stakes had never been higher. But as the debate neared its climax, Pam, frustrated and desperate to regain control, resorted to personal attacks. She accused Karoline of being nothing more than a puppet, controlled by special interest groups and wealthy donors. She suggested that Karoline was too naive to understand the complexities of politics and that her idealistic vision was nothing more than a fantasy. It was in that moment, when Pam thought she had cornered her opponent, that Karoline delivered a response that would go down in history. "Pam," Karoline said, her voice steady but cutting, "you've spent your whole career trying to convince people that power and money are the answer. But the truth is, you're scared. You're scared of a new generation that isn't afraid to fight for what's right. You're scared of real change. You've spent decades playing the game, but the game is over." The room fell silent. The weight of Karoline's words hung in the air. Pam was stunned, her face flushing with a mixture of disbelief and fury. It was a moment of raw honesty, and it cut through the carefully crafted facade that Pam had built over the years. For the first time in the debate, it wasn't about policies or arguments. It was about power, fear, and the future. The audience, sensing the significance of the moment, erupted into applause. Karoline had not only stood up to Pam, but had exposed the very foundation of Pam's political career: fear and the desire to maintain the status quo. Karoline's words were a powerful reminder that real change was coming, and no amount of manipulation or money could stop it. As the debate came to an end, The two women exchanged a tense but respectful handshake, their eyes locked in mutual recognition of the battle they had just fought. Neither had won the debate outright, but Karoline had unquestionably won the moral victory. The public had seen the truth of who they were. Karoline was the future, and Pam was the past. The aftermath of the debate would have far-reaching consequences. Karoline's popularity surged, and Pam's approval ratings plummeted. The battle for the soul of American politics had been waged, and it was clear who the victor was. The nation had watched, and the message had been sent. A new era of leadership had arrived, and it was unstoppable. The tension in the air was palpable as the debate neared its final moments. The night had been a spectacle, a battle of wills between two women with very different visions for the future of the country. What had started as a political confrontation had morphed into something more profound. A clash of ideologies, a fight for the soul of America itself. Pam Bondi, a seasoned politician known for her pragmatic traditional approach, had battled with Karoline Leavitt, the young, bold challenger who represented a new wave of leadership. Now, with the debate coming to an end, the nation was waiting for one final question, one last chance to see which candidate could make their case for the future. The moderator, sensing the gravity of the moment, asked the final question: what will you do to unite America, given the divisions that have grown over the years? This was the question that would define the night, the one that would separate the true leaders from the political players, the one that would reveal whether either candidate had the vision and the courage to heal the rifts in a country that seemed to be on the verge of breaking apart. Pam, visibly rattled by the way the debate had unfolded, took a deep breath before speaking. Her words came quickly, almost automatically, as if rehearsed. She had said similar things countless times before, but tonight it felt hollow. America has always been great because we value our traditions, Pam began, her voice measured. But there was a tightness in her tone. Our strength comes from our ability to maintain the values that have made this nation the greatest in the world. Unity comes from upholding the ideals of hard work, perseverance, and traditional family values. We don't need radical change. We need to get back to what made us strong, back to what we know works. I will lead by bringing people together, using the strength of our history and our shared values to unite us. There was a fleeting moment of silence after Pam finished her answer. The response felt expected, even tired. She hadn't truly addressed the deep divisions in the country. She had merely offered a vague call for unity, wrapped in nostalgic platitudes. For many viewers, it sounded less like a vision and more like an attempt to cling to the past, an attempt to preserve the status quo. Then it was Karoline's turn. She took a deep breath, stood a little taller, and turned to face the camera, speaking directly to the American people watching at home. Her words, carefully chosen, carried weight far beyond the surface. They felt real. They felt like the beginning of something new. Pam, Karoline began, her voice steady but with a quiet intensity. You talk about traditions and values, but the truth is, America is changing. We cannot unite this country by clinging to the past. We can't just pretend that the divisions we see today don't exist. They do, and they're real, but we cannot ignore them. We can't pretend that the political system as it stands is working for the people. It's working for the few, those with power, wealth, and influence. We need leaders who will put the people first. We need leaders who will listen to every voice, no matter where they come from, no matter what they look like. Karoline paused, her eyes scanning the room, making sure she had the audience's full attention. She could feel the weight of the moment, the eyes of millions of Americans on her. The world was listening. This wasn't just another political speech. It was a declaration. We need to build a country where all people can find a place, Karoline continued, where the voices of the working class are heard, where people of all backgrounds, races, and beliefs can come together, not because we're the same, but because we're willing to work together, to support one another. A united America doesn't mean a country that looks the same or thinks the same. It means a country where every voice has a place at the table, where our diversity is our strength, not something to be feared. The words hung in the air, powerful and undeniable. For the first time that night, the audience was silent, absorbing, reflecting, understanding. It wasn't just the delivery, it was the sincerity, the clarity of her message. Karoline wasn't offering empty promises or a return to the past. She was offering a vision for the future, a vision where unity came not from uniformity, but from the strength of diversity. Now is the time for real change, Karoline concluded, her voice rising with quiet passion. We cannot heal our divisions by ignoring them. We need to build bridges, not walls. We need to stop seeing each other as adversaries and start seeing each other as fellow Americans. People who deserve to be heard, who deserve to be seen, who deserve a future where they matter. As she finished, the room erupted into applause. It wasn't the polite, forced clapping that often follows a political speech. It was a spontaneous, enthusiastic outburst. The audience was moved. Karoline had not just answered the question, she had redefined it. She had spoken directly to the heart of what America was struggling with. A country torn apart by partisan divisions, economic inequality, and racial injustice. But more than that, she had spoken about the hope for something better. A country that could heal and come together by embracing its differences rather than fearing them. The moderator, too, seemed taken aback by the power of her words. For a moment, the debate seemed to take on a life of its own. Pam, who had expected to regain control of the conversation, now found herself on the defensive. The contrast between the two candidates was stark. Pam, the representative of a system that had failed to deliver for so many, and Karoline, the young leader with a vision for a more inclusive and just future. Pam's face tightened. She had been trained to handle moments like this, but nothing in her political career had prepared her for the rawness of Karoline's response. For the first time that night, Pam's confidence seemed to waver. She had spent years carefully cultivating her image as a strong, dependable leader, but Karoline's words had cracked that image wide open. For Karoline, the debate had become more than just a contest of words. It had become a battle for the future of the country. She had laid bare the truth of what was at stake. The audience, the viewers at home, were no longer just watching a debate. They were witnessing a shift, a movement, a new wave of leadership that had the potential to change the course of American politics. The final moments of the debate were nothing short of electrifying. As Karoline finished her answer, it felt as though the air itself had shifted. There was a palpable sense that something historic had just taken place. The room buzzed with excitement, and the applause grew louder and louder, echoing throughout the hall. The audience was no longer just listening. They were feeling something they hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Pam, standing beside Karoline, struggled to hide her frustration. The night had not gone as planned. Her carefully crafted arguments, her attempts to paint Karoline as an inexperienced upstart, had been undone by a single speech. The power dynamics in the room had shifted, and it was clear to everyone watching that Karoline had won the moral victory. As the debate ended and the cameras began to roll off the stage, it was evident that the political landscape had been forever altered. Karoline's words had ignited something in the American people. She had offered a vision for unity that was not about the past, but about the future. A future where all Americans, regardless of their background or beliefs, could find common ground. The battle between Pam and Karoline was far from over, but in this moment, Karoline had proven that she was not just a contender, she was a leader. The nation was watching, and they had just witnessed the birth of a new political force. The future of American politics had been reshaped, and it was clear that Karoline Leavitt was at the forefront of that change. The aftermath of the debate was swift and decisive, sending shockwaves through the political world. Karoline Leavitt's triumph was not simply a victory in a televised clash of words. It was a resounding confirmation that the American political landscape was on the cusp of a significant transformation. The response from the public and media was overwhelming, with Karoline's name quickly becoming synonymous with the promise of a new era in leadership. The country had witnessed a young woman stand tall against a seasoned political titan, and in the eyes of many, she had emerged victorious. Pam Bondi, once an untouchable political figure, was left grappling with the aftermath of the debate. The final moments of that night, when Karoline delivered her closing remarks on unity and diversity, had left a lasting impression on the American public. What had once been Pam's domain, control over the narrative, a seat at the table with the power brokers, was slipping away. The polished rhetoric she had relied on for years no longer held the same weight it once did. The backlash against her had been swift. Public opinion polls, once firmly in her favor, now showed a noticeable decline in support. Her image, once synonymous with strength and experience, was now being questioned. In the weeks following the debate, Pam attempted to mount a comeback, trying to regain the momentum she had lost. She returned to the airwaves, appearing on news programs and talk shows, attempting to rewrite the narrative. She tried to paint herself as the voice of reason, the defender of traditional values in a world that seemed to be spiraling out of control. But the damage was done. The American people had seen Karoline's response, and they had seen Pam's defensive and at times desperate attempts to cling to the past. The contrast was undeniable. Karoline had given a voice to the frustrations of many who felt that the political establishment had failed them, and in doing so, she had struck a chord that resonated far beyond the walls of Washington, D.C. Pam's comeback attempts were often met with lukewarm responses. The media, once eager to give her a platform, now scrutinized her every move. Articles highlighting her past missteps resurfaced, questioning her ability to lead in an era that demanded change. There was a growing sense that Pam had become the embodiment of a political establishment that was unwilling or unable to adapt to the shifting needs of the American people. For many, she represented everything that was wrong with the system, an entrenched politician whose focus had been more about preserving her own power than about addressing the real issues that were dividing the country. In contrast, Karoline's star continued to rise. Her social media following surged in the wake of the debate. Tweets, Instagram posts, and viral videos showcasing her bold statements were shared across the country. She was no longer just another political candidate. She was a movement. Young Americans, disillusioned with the political gridlock and the divisiveness they saw in Washington, rallied behind her. Her message of inclusivity, of fighting for the marginalized and unheard, struck a chord with those who had long felt ignored by the establishment. She was not just a politician. She was a symbol of hope for a better future. The media's treatment of Karoline was a stark contrast to the past coverage she had received. Where once she had been dismissed as inexperienced or naive, now she was seen as a potential game changer. Political commentators, pundits, and even former critics began to take notice. Karoline's vision, her ability to connect with the everyday American, and her unapologetic stance on the need for systemic change made her a force to be reckoned with. But she was not content to rest on her laurels. She knew that this was just the beginning. "I've only just started," Karoline said during an interview shortly after the debate, her voice calm but determined. "This isn't just about me winning a debate. This is about changing the way we do politics in America. It's about showing people that we can do better, that we don't have to accept the same broken system. We need to work together, all of us, to build something better. This country deserves more than just lip service. We deserve action." Her words resonated with many who were fed up with the status quo. Karoline's message was clear. She was not here to be a part of the system. She was here to change it. It was a message that captivated not only her supporters, but also those who had previously been indifferent to politics. She had ignited a fire in the hearts of many who believed that their voices had been silenced for too long. The political establishment, which had long been dominated by a few elite figures, was beginning to see cracks in its foundation. Behind the scenes, Karoline's team worked tirelessly to build on her newfound popularity. They organized rallies, town halls, and media appearances, ensuring that her message reached every corner of the country. They knew that the momentum she had built had to be sustained. Karoline wasn't just looking to win a campaign. She was looking to change the way America thought about politics. She wasn't just offering a different vision. She was offering a new kind of politics, one that prioritized the people over the party. In Washington, Karoline's rise was being watched closely by those in power. Pam Bondi, still a powerful figure in conservative circles, was far from finished, but her position had been significantly weakened. The party insiders who had once rallied behind her now found themselves in a precarious situation. Many were beginning to question whether she could remain a viable leader, especially as the younger, more dynamic voices like Karoline gained traction. The status quo was being upended, and the establishment was scrambling to adapt. As Karoline's influence grew, Pam Pam found herself in an increasingly difficult position. She tried to maintain her relevance by aligning herself with key conservative figures and institutions, but it was clear that the political landscape had shifted. Her attacks on Karoline seemed to have lost their effectiveness. The narrative that had worked for so long, one of defending tradition and experience, was no longer enough. Pam's reputation, once built on years of political maneuvering and strategic alliances, was now in jeopardy. For Karoline, however, this was only the beginning. She knew that the battle for the future of America was far from over. She had won the debate, but the real work lay ahead. There were still countless challenges to face, from the entrenched political system to the powerful special interest groups that had long controlled Washington. But Karoline was undeterred. Her vision for the future was clear, and she was prepared to fight for it. The aftermath of the debate had sparked something much bigger than a simple political rivalry. It had ignited a movement, a call for change that resonated across the nation. Karoline's victory was not just about defeating Pam Bondi. It was about proving that a new generation of leadership could rise to the challenge of America's future. It was about showing the American people that they no longer had to settle for the same old politics. The battle was far from over, but for the first time in years, there was a glimmer of hope that change was possible. As Karoline stood at the center of this political revolution, she knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult. But with each passing day, her resolve grew stronger. She was not just fighting for herself, she was fighting for every American who believed in a better, more inclusive future. And as the weeks turned into months, it became clear that Karoline Leavitt was not just a political contender. She was a force of nature, and the American political landscape would never be the same. Months later, Karoline Leavitt stood on a stage, addressing a crowd of thousands. Her journey from the heated exchange on live TV to this moment had been nothing short of remarkable. She had faced down one of the most formidable political figures in the country and emerged victorious. But she knew that true victory would not be measured by applause or headlines. It would be measured by the impact she could have on the lives of ordinary Americans. As the crowd cheered, Karoline smiled, knowing that the battle for change was far from over. She had proven that one voice could make a difference, that courage could overcome fear, and that the future of America belonged to those who were willing to fight for it. And as the sun set on another day, Karoline Leavitt knew that the fight for a better tomorrow had only just begun. As Karoline Leavitt's journey continues to unfold, one thing is clear: the future of American politics is no longer in the hands of the old guard. Karoline represents a new wave of leadership, one that prioritizes the people over power, action over rhetoric, and change over complacency. This battle is far from over, and every step she takes brings her closer to reshaping the political landscape for generations to come. If you believe in a future where leadership is defined by integrity, inclusivity, and vision, join Karoline in this fight for a better tomorrow. Like, comment, and share your thoughts below. Let's keep this conversation going. The change we want to see starts with us. Together, we can make a difference.